Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And good morning to all of you. Is it still morning? This promises to be an exciting conference after that opening address. And it's going to be more exciting this afternoon when we listen to Hugo Salinas Bryce and the others. I thought that we had concluded our effort to define money, but Bill Steele has reopened the subject this morning in a very daring way. Our conference must ensure that we explain issues relating to money in a manner that can be readily understood, not only by those who are present here in this gathering in Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia, but also by the hapless multitudes around the world, many of whom are listening to us and viewing us on the internet, who know little or nothing of the subject, but who look to us for guidance. And hence there is an imperative for simplicity and for clarity while avoiding the use of technical jargon. However, we must provide an adequate explanation for the term petrodollar, since our view is that it is symbolically present in a hadith or a saying of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, on which this presentation is based. We must reveal the staggering role that it has played and still plays in sustaining today's unjust monetary system, as well as the equally unjust international banking system. Both of these are absolutely unique phenomena in human economic and monetary history. No one in history has ever experienced this unique injustice and oppression that mankind now experiences in the worlds of money and banking, in the strange worlds of money and banking. And this perhaps explains partly the strange ignorance of the reality of the subject. Our view is that petro money has an even more sinister role to play in the new monetary system which will emerge to replace the present one, consequent upon the demise of the US dollar. The monstrously unjust role played by the monetary and banking system in the affairs of the world today, and now this is my most important statement. This cannot be adequately explained if we restrict ourselves to purely economic and monetary analysis. Rather, there are important non-economic and monetary questions which must also be answered if we are to fully understand the subject. For example, gold and silver have continuously functioned as money, at least in our history, 1400 years of our history. Until modern Western civilization emerged with an agenda of establishing its dominion, a strange and mysterious agenda of establishing its dominion over the rest of the world. Western wars of aggression led to colonization of much of the non-European world. And so now I ask some questions. Is it by accident or by design that decolonization resulted in the rest of the non-European world being incorporated into the mysterious and ominous European monetary system in which, for the first time in human history, mankind was prohibited by international law from using gold as money, and in which money with intrinsic value was replaced by money with no intrinsic value, prohibited. Is it by accident or by design that the new European monetary system supported a European-comprised banking system which together operated in such wise that they and their clients grew incredibly wealthy while the rest of the world was imprisoned in increasing poverty and destitution. Has that economic impoverishment led to political servitude? Is it true or is it false that modern political servitude invariably implies conformity with the Zionist agenda? Is it by accident or by design that European Zionist Jews and Zionist Christians have a firm control over that monetary and international banking system and are using it to the advantage of the State of Israel? Is it by accident or by design that the modern secular West continued the jihad that they call the Crusades, waged by medieval Christian Europe to liberate the Holy Land from Muslim rule until success was finally achieved in 1917? Why did non-European Christians refrain from participating in a Christian jihad? Why did Western European Christians fight their Eastern Christian brothers in faith while making their way in a Christian jihad to the Holy Land? And finally, is it by accident or by design that the West then presided over the birth of a State of Israel in the Holy Land, some 2,000 years after Holy Israel had been destroyed by divine decree? And the Jews were then brought back, sometime by hook and sometime by crook, to reclaim the Holy Land as their own some 2,000 years after they were expelled from it by divine decree. Did all of the above take place by accident? Or was it part of a grand design that would eventually make it possible for Israel to rule the world? Why would Israel want to rule the world? The Quran has declared that it has come to explain all things. It's Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah number 16, verse 89. And we have some of our books, Jerusalem and the Quran, the gold dinar and silver dirham, Islam and the future of money, in which we have turned to the Quran and turned to the Hadith to try to provide answers to these questions. And what these answers indicate is that there is an eschatological dimension to the subject of contemporary world affairs, which is absolutely indispensable for proper understanding of the subjects of money and of banking. And at the heart of that explanation is the return of the true Messiah, Jesus, the Son of Mary. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon them both, who when he returns will rule the world from Jerusalem. And at the heart of that explanation is the advent of a false Messiah who will attempt, prior to the return of the true Messiah, to impersonate the true Messiah. If he is to successfully impersonate him, he would have to do the following. Number one, liberate the Holy Land for the Jews. He's already done that. Number two, bring the Jews back to the Holy Land to reclaim it as their own. He's already done that. Number three, restore a state of Israel in the Holy Land and deceive the Jews into embracing it as Holy Israel. He's already done that. Number four, cause that imposter Israel to become the ruling state in the world. I recognize Dajjal, the false Messiah, as the actor responsible for all of the above. As a consequence of our Islamic eschatology, We were able to understand events unfolding in the world for quite some time now as preparatory to the establishment of a Zionist-controlled world government, world economy, and universal currency or global currency. Our eschatology also allowed us to recognize petro-money as located at the very heart of the Dajjal's quest to rule the world. We turn now to the European monetary system, which we referred to recently. In the wake of the First and Second World Wars, a new European monetary system was established at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. Agreement was reached among the Western rulers of the world on a monetary system in which only one currency, the US dollar, would be redeemable in gold. You could take the dollar and get the gold at $35. And now Dr. Mahathir made reference to it. All other currencies in the world would have their value determined in relation to the US dollar. Our Islamic analysis of this strange new monetary system can be found in my book, The Gold Dinar and Silver, Dirham, Islam and the Future of Money. But this was, in Islam, bid'ah, an innovation as high as the mountain. It seems, however, to have escaped Islamic scholarship. Secondly, only governments through their central banks could redeem dollars for gold. Ordinary people could not do that. An institution known as the International Monetary Fund would be established, and each member state would be required to deposit 25% of your gold reserves with the IMF. These provisions were in reality quite flimsy, and they gave the false impression that the new monetary system was somehow anchored in gold. In fact, the gold that was deposited with the IMF functioned merely as a means through which state could seek loans on interest from the IMF. But more importantly, to the extent that the member state faithfully complied with the requirement of depositing that gold, the IMF would know the extent of gold reserves of each country in the world. This was further assured through the requirement that member states must report to the fund all sales and purchases of gold. What was not disclosed was that the US dollar would remain redeemable in gold only for as long as it was convenient for the US government to honor that obligation. What was not disclosed was that the US dollar would remain redeemable in gold only for as long as it was convenient for the US government to honor that obligation. Just as ominous was the other possibility that the US government could renege on its legal obligation to redeem dollars for gold, it could also refuse to repatriate the 25% of gold that it had stored. Let us pause for a moment to remind those who are unaware that the US government has already abandoned its legal obligation to redeem dollars for gold, and now refuses to even audit the gold belonging to the rest of the world that is stored in the United States of America. Strangely and mysteriously, the use of gold as money was prohibited in the Articles of Agreement of the IMF. Nowhere was an explanation offered for this strange prohibition, and conveniently so. No one asked for an explanation, not even the scholars of Islam. What are the likely reasons why the Articles of Agreement of the IMF prohibited the use of gold as money? I'm venturing to offer an answer. Number one, to prevent the possibility that gold used as money could challenge and could cause a collapse of the bogus paper money monetary system. Number two, to ensure that gold belonging to the rest of the world but stored in the United States would remain undisturbed in US territory until the time arrives when the monetary system of paper money collapses. And the world then returns to gold as money, as it's coming. At that time, the legal prohibition for the use of gold as money would be removed. And the gold stored with the Zionist owned and controlled Federal Reserve Bank in New York would then be secretly and illegally transferred to Israel. That transfer, in fact, may already have taken place. And so the Israel rule over the world of money will remain unchallenged and unchallengeable. The gold stored in the United States will remain largely undisturbed, since there will be no reason for a member state to seek repatriation of its gold. What would you do with the gold? You can't use it as money. And number three, once the member states of the IMF had deposited 25% of their gold reserves with the IMF, and member states had begun to take IMF loans that were secured by that gold, it would then be possible to encourage them to store more and more of their gold reserves with the IMF. And if they held on to their gold, they could not use them in any way. And so the provision of the Articles of Agreement prohibiting the use of gold as money opened the way for the United States to eventually be entrusted with the storage of most of the gold reserves in the world. Excuse me. It is absolutely amazing that the world of Islamic scholarship never responded, since 1944, up to this day, to the IMF Articles of Agreement, to point out that Allah Most High made the use of gold and silver and commodities of food consumption as money. He made them halal. Gold and silver and articles of food consumption as money. He made it halal. And if you make haram what Allah made halal, if you make haram what Allah made halal, then according to the Quran, that is blasphemy. That's shirk. The one sin that Allah would not forgive. Allah had made the use of gold and silver and commodities of food consumption as money halal. I don't have the time to define money more than this in my presentation. And if you make haram what Allah made halal, that is shirk, according to the Quran, Surah At-Tawbah. And shirk is blasphemy. And the Quran says this is the one sin that Allah will not forgive. If we then use that money, which is substituted, what Allah had made halal, they made haram, and what they have substituted for the gold, or for the real money, we then use it, we also now join in the shirk. It is absolutely amazing that the world of Islamic scholarship failed to recognize that since money in the Quran and Sunnah was always money which had intrinsic value, the value of the money is in the money and created by Allah, not by George Soros. If Allah had given us money which is always money with intrinsic value, then it was an abandonment of the Quran and of the Sunnah to turn and accept money with no intrinsic value. The paper money was bogus. It was fraudulent. It was haram. But kindly allow me to also say, Islamic banking doesn't appear to have understood that as yet. In addition, one of the most important functions of the IMF was to provide loans on interest. It used to be usury, but usury became a loaded word, like homosexual had to be changed to gay. So usury had to be changed to interest. One of the most important functions of the IMF was to provide loans on interest to member states. These loans, of course, will be provided from funds deposited with the IMF by such member contributors of the USA. and gold deposited with the US, with the IMF, could be used to secure such loans. But Allah Most High, in the Quran, in the Torah, in the Gospel, prohibited money being lent on interest. Money has no time value, not with the God who created us. He had prohibited money being lent on interest. And the IMF became the money lender with whom Allah and His Messenger were waging war, and with whom the Prophet ﷺ had issued a curse. He cursed all four: the one who took riba, the one who gave riba, the one who recorded the transaction, and the two witnesses. Despite all of the above, the strangely silent world of Islamic scholarship saw nothing and did nothing to warn Muslims and to prevent Muslim membership in the IMF. In fact, the only challenge to the new international monetary system that emerged in the first 25 years of its existence came from France. I wish I had the time to tell you what de Gaulle, President Charles de Gaulle, did, but the French challenge eventually led to the United States reneging on its obligation to redeem dollars for gold. And so Bretton Woods collapsed in August 1971. Would Islamic scholarship now take the opportunity, with the collapse of Bretton Woods, to articulate an Islamic conception of money and of a monetary system? My research has led me to only one book, written by Umar Chapra, entitled Towards a Just Monetary System. Other than that, the world of Islamic scholarship remained mysteriously silent. Nor were the French able to grasp the opportunity presented by the collapse of Bretton Woods in August 1971 to lead an effort for the establishment of a new and a better monetary system. Instead, within just 2 years of the collapse of Bretton Woods, the Americans pulled the rabbit. Within 2 years of the collapse of Bretton Woods, the Americans pulled the rabbit out of the bag and stunned the world in the wake of the October 1973 Arab-Israeli war and the simultaneous Arab oil embargo on the United States, with the surreptitious establishment of a stunningly cunning petrodollar monetary system. What was that system? Before we turn to it, let us quote the hadith of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, on which this paper is based. The Prophet said, Allah's blessings be upon him, that among the signs of the last day is that the river Euphrates would uncover a mountain of gold. He said that people would fight for that gold, and 99 out of every 100 would be killed. But each one of them would expect to be the one in 100 who would survive. He went on to warn that whoever is present at that time should not take of that gold. Sahih Bukhari. The river Euphrates did uncover a mountain of gold less than 100 years ago. It was black gold, namely oil. And there have been constant wars, one after the other since that time, for control over that black gold. We'll explain in a moment how the petrodollar came into being when an ocean of oil commenced functioning as a mountain of gold in a new petrodollar monetary system. However, the world still has to experience such wars over which 99 out of every 100 would be killed, meaning wars with such weapons of mass destruction, which would cause such colossal deaths. It is unclear whether those wars over the mountain of gold would culminate in the Malhama, or the Great War prophesied by the Prophet. Such a great war would substantially reduce the human population in the world, and then tiny Israel would have far less difficulty in ruling the world. Our view is that we were prohibited from taking any of that mountain of gold because that monetary system in which oil will now be used as gold would function as an instrument for the enslavement of mankind. To the extent that we used it, we would eventually be enslaved. And now the road to the petrodollar. There's evidence which strongly suggests that the Arab-Israeli War of 1973 was stage managed. It led to the Arab-Israeli War and the oil boycott of the United States. It led to the spectacular rise in the price of oil from $3 a barrel to $12 a barrel, 400% rise in the price of oil. The spectacular rise in the price of oil not only benefited the American and British-owned oil companies, but also, more importantly, the largely Arab oil-producing countries. The windfall in Arab oil revenues created an opportunity that was cleverly exploited by the United States to seek to replace a monetary system based on gold, or superficially based in gold, as Bretton Woods, with a new one based on oil. In other words, the Americans wanted oil to function as gold in a new petro-monetary system. Henry Kissinger, the American Secretary of State, successfully negotiated with Saudi Arabia's King Faisal an agreement requiring oil to be sold for only US dollars. Saudi Arabia then persuaded the other Arabs to join, and that's the birth of the petrodollar. Excuse me. The Saudi king is unlikely to have realized that he had signed into the creation of an evil monetary system that was prophesied by his own prophet. As a result of that agreement, oil now functioned as gold on behalf of the US dollar. The agreement was manifestly haram. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ insisted on the preservation of a free and fair market. Any agreement requiring oil to be sold for only requiring oil to be sold for only US dollars constituted a violation of the free market. And since the US dollar could no longer be redeemed for gold, it was also a violation of the fair market. The United States no longer had to bother about the relationship between gold reserves and the quantity of US dollars in circulation. No. The price of gold could rise to infinity without posing any threat, real threat to the US dollar. In other words, an opportunity was created for the Federal Reserve to create as much money as it wanted with the sky as the limit, and to then feed that money into the banking system. And as the banks lend that money on interest, the newly created money would then be legally recognized as money. Indeed, the world has moved away from printing paper, as Dr. Mahathir explained this morning. All you have to do is sign a check for $7 trillion. Kissinger also got agreement that windfall profits that would now come to the Arab oil producing states from the ever rising price of oil consequent upon the ever falling value of the dollar would be invested in Western banks in what common people recognize as fixed deposits. They would invest in their petrodollars in US Treasury bonds, for example. And so petrodollars would transform them into moneylenders on interest. I suspect that the quid pro quo for this agreement was a secret defense treaty in which the United States guaranteed the security of the state of Saudi Arabia. We are now located at that moment in the historic process, when from our eschatological perspective, Dajjal is about to transit to the third and final stage of his mission. And you read Jerusalem in the Quran, you'll understand what I'm talking about here. In the first stage of his mission, about which the Prophet ﷺ had spoken, the world experienced the emergence of Pax Britannica, with the sterling pound emerging as an international currency. That didn't happen by accident. In stage 2, Pax Americana replaced Pax Britannica, and the US dollar replaced the sterling pound as the international currency. This is not by accident. And our view, expressed in Jerusalem in the Quran, which was published in 2002, is that Pax Judaica will replace Pax America, and a new international currency will replace the US dollar. We do not know whether that new international currency will be the Israeli shekel or the Bangkok, or whether the Zionist bankers will coin a new name for electronic money. Whatever be the name of that new international currency or global money that would succeed the US dollar, it should be clear that it will be based on the same petro-money foundation as the petrodollar. This would not be possible without an alliance between Israel and the Arab oil-producing states, Saudi Arabia in particular. So we are now able to understand more clearly why Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessings be upon him, made that ominous declaration concerning Najd. That's where the Saudi rulers have emerged, Najd. He said that from Najd would come the horns of Satan. The greatest of all dangers posed by the petro-money monetary system is it allows the Zionist-controlled banking system to create as much money as they wish. There is no legal limit to the creation of money. The sky is the limit. And then they will lend it to Egypt. And then Egypt will have to toe the line to get the IMF loan. There is no legal limit to the creation of money. The wealth can then be used to enslave those who oppose Israel, while enriching those who support Israel. In fact, many people in the world today already live at the door of that slavery. Now then, to end, how do we respond to the petrodollar? Since Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessings be upon him, gave the order, he said those present at that time should not touch that gold. The implication is that Muslims in particular have a religious obligation to stop using today's paper, plastic, and electronic money that is bogus, that is fraudulent, that is haram. We have counseled a strategy of defiance of the legal prohibition of the use of gold as money. However, in view of the possibility of state violence in response to gold being used as money, since the IMF prohibits the use of gold as money, including gold coins being seized by the state, and since there is no legal prohibition of the use of silver as money, Hugo Salina's price must be smiling now. Since there is no legal prohibition of the use of silver as money, Muslims should now lead the rest of the world, or join with the rest of the world, rather, in creating markets in which silver dirhams will be used as a medium of exchange. Whether it's the actual coin or the electronic coin can be debated later. The point is returning to real money. It is unrealistic to assume that there is any possibility of getting petrol money out of circulation in the world of Islam. Hardly any government dares to defy the Zionists. And the ulama or religious scholars of Islam have so far refused to declare paper, plastic and electronic money now in use to be haram. Consequently, silver dirhams will circulate alongside petrol money. What problems are we likely to encounter when silver coins circulate alongside petrol money? I hope this conference will take up the problem. How should they be resolved? I hope this conference will take up that problem. No one, perhaps, has done more research on this subject, and I urge you to come out this afternoon. No one, perhaps, has done more research on this subject than our next speaker, Hugo Salinas Price of Mexico. Thank you.